Hi, we got a lot of you here today. Rick is, where is he? Oh, where he usually is. Rick, I don't have anything to introduce you by, so I bet you can do a good job of that. But he's going to bring a wealth of information to us about things that us young ones need to know about. And I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
Thank you. Well, let's just start off this way. How many of you are seniors? Okay, good. So I got the right audience.
I got that one right.
How many think that at some point in the future you or a family member may need to move to some type of retirement community other than Heritage Ranch if you already live there? Okay, so what we're going to do is, or I'm going to do it, and the information that I'm going to share is based on 33 years of being in this business. The early part, I worked for some big companies like Marriott Senior Living Services. How many knew Marriott, the hotel company, was in the retirement community business? So I worked for them, and I worked for several others, and then most recently had my own business. So I'm sort of an insider, so I can give you information that will help you make the right choice. That's the whole point, is to give you information to help you make the right choice if you do need to move, or a family member needs to go to some additional type of senior living community. So what I'm going to chat about today with you, and like to have a conversational style, is the big picture, what's going on in the senior living industry today. Because it's pretty much in turmoil right now, and I'll explain that. What your options are. Okay, so what are the choices out there? If we do need to move, what are our options? And then what are some things you need to know or think about to help you make the right choice? So hopefully we'll be able to get through this in about 45 minutes. But one of the first things that I think you need to know is there's two types of owners of retirement communities. There's for-profit companies like Marriott, obviously was a for-profit company. Most of the new senior living communities are for-profit companies. Their motive for being in the business is to make a profit. Some are very, very good in care, and some focus heavily on the profit end of it. Then there's non-profit, sponsored senior living communities, and those are typically faith-based organizations sponsored by churches, and their motive is to fulfill the mission of the nonprofit organization. So their motive isn't necessarily to make a profit. I do want to make the point that there's some for-profits that are really good, that have a good mission and a good passion, and then obviously the non-for-profits do focus on the mission. So if you go, you need to find out, ask, who owns this community? I want to know if it's a for-profit community or a non-for-profit community. Staffing issues. The biggest issue in senior living today is finding people to work there, especially the hands-on caregivers. They are competing with McDonald's and Burger King that are paying $15 an hour, and the caregivers that make maybe not even that much. There's a huge issue with staffing in senior living today. So and I'm going to tell you as we get near the end, what to look for is you need to ask about, tell us about your staffing, how long they've been here, how much turnover you have, all that kind of stuff. So that's a big picture thing today. If you ask a CEO of a senior living company today, what's your biggest issue? They're going to say staffing. The second biggest issue is extreme competition. How many of you are noticing every corner now has a senior living community? So recent statistics, and I just looked at some on Friday, overall occupancy in all types of senior living communities is about 88%. It's the lowest it's been in 7 years nationwide. The reason is there's so much new empty competition that it makes the overall occupancy low. So there's oversupply for the current demand because all of the financial people and investors all want to be building for the baby boomers. And right now, money's available for apartment developers, multifamily developers, shopping center developers. Oh, well, let's go build a senior living community and take advantage of all these baby boomers coming along. So that is a big issue in the industry today. There's a lot of people getting into it that really don't know what they're doing. Unless they have a good operator, they need to hire a good operator. And that's management. The most important thing as far as the care that you or your family member is going to get is how good is the management at the community. That's huge. Now, many of these for-profit developers hire management companies. So just so you know, it may be owned by an investment group, managed by a property management or senior living management company, but management is key. And at the end, when we talk about what you need to do to make the right choice, I'll share with you some questions to ask about the management of that specific community. Multi-site versus single location. So some of the communities that you will look at will be part of a chain, a national chain, a regional chain. Well, they'll have multiple communities throughout the region or throughout the country. Some you may look at are a one site, single site. It's just one community owned by one person or one company. So you say, so what's the difference? One of the big differences, and I learned this really big time at Marriott and at some of the other, couple of the other companies I worked at, is the multi-site companies have a corporate support team that will come and help the local team get things done right. For example, when they're opening a new one, they'll bring in people from an existing community and make sure everybody gets everything set up right and operating right. They just have a much higher degree of support from the corporate organization. A single site, they do all that they do pretty much on their own, and that could be an issue. Now, if you're looking at a single site community and they've been in business 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 years, they're probably fine. But a brand new startup, well, yeah, this is our first retirement community. Are you part of a chain? No, we're figuring it out. Just be careful about that. So the multi-site typically has very good corporate support to make sure the communities are doing things right according to their policies. Value through volume. This is something I do. I do these seminars similar to this around the country, and this is one of the points I make in that seminar, is a lot of people don't realize the value through volume of a senior living community, and this applies to any of them. And that is, some people think, oh my gosh, the prices are so high, their prices are so high. If you really compare it with everything that you're paying when you buy stuff one at a time, and you look at what the overall cost is, it's probably not that bad. And the reason is the retirement community, and the story that I use is, if you were gonna go buy a chicken for dinner tonight after church, after this Sunday school, how many of you are gonna negotiate with the grocer on the price of the chicken? Senior living communities buy 1,000 chickens in one order. How much do you think they pay per chicken? And all the supplies that they buy in senior living communities, they're buying on a volume. So they have the opportunity to pass a lot of the savings through their volume purchasing onto the residents. It's kind of a subtle thing, not many people talk about it, but it is a big picture thing where they're buying for a group all the stuff that the residents consume allows them to buy it for much less than what you and I pay when we go buy one at a time. Aging in the right place. So you would hear AARP and the government to some degree say, well, but everybody wants to stay in their house, and it's best to just stay where you are, and if you need help, just bring it into your house, because everybody wants to stay where they are in their house. Finally, a professor in Florida, who's a PhD, studied this, and he wrote a book, Aging in the Right Place. And it's a 500-page book. It's about $50 if you want to buy it. But he makes the good point that at some point, a single-family house, for some of us, is just not going to be the right place to successfully age in the future. So finally, there's been documentation of that. And so that, from a national perspective, people are beginning to realize that at some point, having this big house isn't really going to be the best place. Now, most of us have already done the big downsize to Heritage Ranch, and that's good, because now we've gone from the 4-bedroom house to the 2-bedroom house and have right-sized. And for many of us, it is the right place right now for us to live. Okay, so what are your options? Stay in the house until something happens. Say, well, no, just you be like my mom, who said she was living in El Paso, and, you know, she was frail, and my sister and I would say, you know, it's time for you to move to a senior living community. No. Don't even talk to me about that. Don't want to hear about it. I know in your business, you're in the business, you know all about it, but I don't want to talk about it. Well, what are you going to do? What's your plan? Well, when something happens, we'll deal with it. And guess who dealt with it when she broke her hip? 10 days in El Paso, my sister and I. So the point is, that's one option, is to say, no, we're just going to stay here. And if something happens, then we'll go to assisted living or memory care or the nursing home or rehab or whatever. Or you can bring in home health care services. One thing you need to know about it, for a temporary situation, a temporary health situation, like when I had the heart transplant stuff going on, we had home health come once a week to do the dressings and all that, but we know it was going to be temporary. Just know on a long-term basis, it can be very, very expensive. But it is an option to say, well, I'd like to kind of stay and bring in home health care. How about moving in with your kids? How many want to do that? That's certainly an option. Or move to an independent living, senior living community of some type, or one of the others on the top of the list there. So what are the types of communities? So I'm going to go quickly through the different types and then talk a little bit more about each individual type with you. And I've thrown in some local ones that I'm aware of that will help you relate to the ones that are right here in the area. So first kind of what people call senior living, we call them active adult, 55 plus. That's the really first move that most people make if they're like most of us did, to Heritage Ranch. They're typically either a family or duplex style like at Heritage Ranch, or now there's 55 plus apartments. And how many of you have received mailings from the Overture? Okay, and the new one just on the other side of Central Larkspur. I just got something in my mailbox. And the Discovery Village at Twin Rivers is a 55 plus. There's 3 right here in the area that are apartment style 55 plus. Then Life Plan or Continuing Care. Those are ones that have all the levels of care on the same campus: independent living, assisted living, memory care, nursing care, rehab care. Examples would be Highland Springs, Edgemere, Legacy at Willow Bend. And I'll talk a little bit more about those because there's some really important things you need to know about that type of community. Full service independent living. So that would be an independent living community that does not have assisted living or memory care or nursing care as part of the campus, but they have a meal program, they have activity program, they have transportation, they have housekeeping. Alexis Estates, that really pretty building on the outside on Waters Creek, have you seen it? I'll show you a picture in a minute. Atria down on George Bush is what would be called a full service independent living. It's an apartment style living, but all of the services, meals, transportation, everything like that. Now, a new thing that's coming out is full service, and IL means independent living, with assisted living and memory care. So the big growth around the country right now is to do the full service independent living and go ahead and add onto the property assisted living and memory care on the same campus, but no nursing care. Those are the ones that we're seeing the most new development on. Then tax credit independent living. If you go up Greenville, right across from Medical City hospital, all those senior living communities up there, some of those, the ones that are apartment style, are tax credit senior living communities, which means that the developer gets the tax credit in return for having those available at a much lower rate than typical. And I'll tell you more detail about that, but that's another type of independent living. Most of us probably would not qualify financially, meaning the income is probably more than what they would allow. Then you move into assisted living and memory care. And I know that Nancy would be happy to chat with you about personal experiences with memory care. Then many of the newer ones have assisted living and memory care right in the same building, basically, in separate areas. So there's numerous options in the area for those types. Then you have long-term nursing care, and that's somebody that needs nursing care on a long-term basis. They may have finished rehab. They're not even strong or well enough to go to assisted living, so they go to what we know as the nursing home. It's a long-term care. And then you have short-term rehab care, where you would go for recovery for a stroke or a hip replacement or a neurological thing or something like that, short-term rehab. So those are the types of senior living options based on what the need would be. So let's go over each one a little bit more in detail. So active adult or 55 plus, the single family, Heritage Ranch, Robson Ranch, Frisco Lakes. There's some other smaller ones coming up. There's a new smaller one coming up in Prosper, and I think there's one in the Colony. I think they may have 100 or 200 home developments, so some smaller ones coming up. Typically they're home ownership based, where you actually own it, and the amenities pretty much are recreational, like what we have at Heritage Ranch. The apartment style, and there's the Overture, Larkspur, Discovery Village, they're rental. You just pay a monthly rent there. And minimal services, they may have a continental breakfast, happy hours, a fitness room, some activities, things like that, but not the full services, and therefore the price is less than a full service senior living community. Fitness, a pool, things like that. So this company that owns the Overture is a big investment group, and it's managed by a company in Irving, Texas, and they're starting 40 of them around the country. So they're going really big time, and some of them are doing pretty good and some of them not so good. I'm in touch with one of the guys in the ownership group, and they're real interested in how Fairview's doing, so I keep them up to date on that. Then, continuing care retirement communities. The new name, you may start hearing people call it the Life Plan Community. They used to be called Continuing Care Retirement Communities. The National Association is starting to call them Life Plan, because they say people that move to these are planning for the rest of their life. They move in when they're well and independent with a plan that if they need assisted living or memory care or nursing care later, it's taken care of. They're already there. They planned for the future by moving to one of these communities. So all levels of care. Highland Springs, which I'm sure many of you know about, Edgemere, Legacy of Willow Bend, and then Ventana. Let me just make an interesting comment here. The one on the top is one of the buildings at Highland Springs. The one on the bottom is Ventana on Central Expressway and Northwest Highway. That's going to be about, average about $800,000 to move into, believe it or not. So now, the one other thing about these life plan communities or CCRCs is they require what I call an entrance deposit. When you go to the community, they're going to say entrance fee, but it's really an entrance deposit plus a monthly fee. And those entry deposits are going to range typically, I think at Highland Springs, they're probably around $250,000 up. This new one, Ventanas, is going to be extremely expensive, catering to the Highland Park market. And typically, they say that you pay that deposit, plus you pay the monthly fee, and in the Ventanas case, and in the Edgemere case, and the Legacy at Willow Bend case, those are what we refer to as life care. They say you pay this deposit plus the monthly fee, and then if you ever need assisted living or memory care or nursing care, your monthly fee will not change. You'll pay the same amount, and that's life care. And that's why the entrance deposit is so much, because that pool of money they collect offsets the added cost you would have if you moved from independent living to assisted living into nursing. But they say, we're going to give you the predictability of long-term cost in return for giving the entrance deposit. So that's the life care. There's other entrance deposits that are called fee-for-service that says our entrance deposit's less, and if you need to move from independent living to assisted living, you're going to pay the higher monthly fee in assisted living. And then if you need to go to nursing care, you're going to pay the higher monthly fee. So you pay a lower entrance deposit there. The one big thing you need to know is, in most cases, they will tell you when you leave here, you're going to get 90%, 100%, 50%. They all have different refund plans. You or your estate will get that back. That's why I call it a deposit, because most of them do have terms for refund of the entrance deposit when you leave, subject to conditions. Entrance deposits are refunded subject to the sale of your apartment, which is where they get the money to refund it to you. Yes, sir?
On those that require an entrance deposit, is the company bound to keep so much money in some kind of secure fund to pay people back? In other words, if they've got $10 million, are they required by federal law to keep so much of that available for refund?
That's a good question. So Dan asked, are these types of communities required to hold reserves that will allow for the repayment of your entrance deposit? And yes, by state regulations. It's not federally regulated, but every state regulates the continuing care retirement communities. Many of them are regulated by the insurance department of the state, because the life care community says, give us all this money and we'll give you discounted health care when you need it, which is in essence insurance. It's kind of like long-term care insurance. The entrance deposit that you pay in return for a lower assisted living, memory care, nursing cost is really long-term care insurance. I mean, it has the same effect. But they do not have enough in those reserves to fund a large number of people wanting to move out all at the same time. And you need to read the contract and ask very clearly, tell me, and make sure I understand specifically what are the terms of the refund, what has to happen for me to get my refund back. And then the other cool thing is that most of the states have a requirement that they provide to any future resident a financial disclosure statement. So you want to say, I'm interested, but I need to see your financial disclosure. Then take it to an accountant and find out if you're comfortable with the financial strength of these communities, because some have gone bankrupt. Back in the Great Recession, some of these communities did go bankrupt. And it was a function of the real estate market. So they provide a great lifestyle, but there is some risk, especially if real estate gets bad and people can't sell their house to buy the unit that you're moving out of, which happened the last time we had the big issue. There are a few that are built as rental. The Forum at Park Lane, right across from North Park Mall. I was involved in the very original development of that. You pay rent there, which is cool. You don't need to pay the entrance deposit. And they have the assisted living, memory care, nursing care, rehab, Signature Point. And there's a new one, the Legacy at Uptown, coming. That'll be a Jewish-sponsored community in Uptown. So those are going to be rental. Yes, ma'am.
Rick, I don't know if you're going to get to this point, but I have done some checking into some of this stuff. Not that I'm ready to go anywhere yet, but Highland Springs, Edgemere, and some of those places, you have to be independent. You can't already be needing the assisted living thing. You have, and I know someone that went to this, that goes to this church. She doesn't come very often, but she couldn't go to like Highland Springs because she already needed the assisted living part of it, and you have to be independent.
Good point.
And
Yep.
you have to let
Yeah, they have entry requirements. They want people to be not needing the health care right after they move in, because there's a risk for them for that, especially the life care type. So you really do need to be independent, getting around on your own very well to move into one of those. Okay. So then you have independent living with services, but no health care on site, and this is the Alexis Gardens. They're on Waters Creek, or Alexis Estates, and they provide independent living apartment style living with meals. I believe they have 3 meals a day. Most of them have 1 meal a day provided in the rent, and then optional you can buy the other 2. I think Alexis includes all meals, activities, housekeeping, emergency alert, security, really a lot of full service living in apartment style living, and they're rental. Then you have the independent living with assisted living and memory care attached to it. And this is, there aren't any right up in this area of Allen McKinney right now. So this is one in Bryan College Station that I'm doing some work with right now. And I want to point out to you, see if I can find, see that part of the building is the independent living right there. Then the assisted living is right there. And then the memory care is right there. So it's one campus with all 3 levels of care right together. These are very popular all over the country, becoming more and more popular because most people say, you know, I know that at some point I'm going to need or likely need assisted living or memory care, and I don't want to have to move again. So if I can move into a place now and then later I need the care, it's right down the hall. I still have my friends, I still know the people, they knew me, and this one, these type are rental. So I can take that money from the sale of my house and invest it and use some of the proceeds from my investment to help offset the cost of the rent. So those are very popular.
Rick,
Yes, sir.
One question. Would people physically have to move into assisted living or memory units? Or
Yeah.
do they stay where they
No, they move over.
Okay.
Once you get to where you need assisted living, they move over to the assisted living because they don't have the staff in the independent living to provide those services in independent living. Now, you can bring home health care into independent living. It's, you know, the fair housing law says, you know, well, it's your house, you're paying rent, you have a right to live here, and if you want to pay to bring home health into your independent living apartment, you can do it. Most independent living senior communities don't like to see that happen because it makes it very hard to market to independent living prospects when many of the independent living residents are extremely frail receiving home health care services. And they really will get better care when they're in the assisted living or memory care where the whole setting is designed to provide that type of service. Good question.
We have a good friend whose husband needed to go. I mean, they were together in their independent living apartment, and then when you need your spouse has a catastrophe, a surgery, and needs rehab or needs assistance, then you can still stay in your independent living and have your spouse or, close by, so that you don't have to hop in the car, go to a hospital, go to a rehab. And it has been a godsend for her through the years, because
Yes.
she's,
And that's typically what happens, is one of the couple needs the assisted living or memory care, and they move into that area, and the other one, what you see a lot is, let's say they're in a 2-bedroom apartment, and one of them moves to assisted living or memory care, then the one that's still independent says, I don't want to pay the 2-bedroom rate because it's just me. As soon as a 1-bedroom becomes available, then they can move to a 1-bedroom for a lower cost, because now they have to pay the cost of the independent living and the assisted living, just like if you were in your home. I get a lot of people say, well, can my spouse move to assisted living and the cost be the same? Well, no, it'd just be like in your house. If you're living in your house and one of you needs to go to assisted living, you still have to pay your house payment and you still have to pay the assisted living fee. So, but that's a good point. Now, there's a new one.
Wait, there was
folks-
another question. Sally had a question.
I just wanted to
Sorry.
know if you go to assisted living, and we'll go back to independent, if it's just like a broken hip or a.
Yes, good question. She said, can you go temporarily to assisted living and then go back to your apartment? Absolutely. That's what I typically recommend is if someone's in rehab and they're coming out of rehab, they go to assisted living where there's somebody there to provide meals and help them get up and get around for a couple of weeks or a month, and then go back to their apartment. Absolutely. Yeah, good question.
Is there a cost for that then?
Pardon?
Is there a change in cost to do that from one level to the other?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a difference. The assisted living is going to be more costly than the independent living.
And in that case, you're going to be paying twice because you got to keep your independent
Right.
place for, so it's there when you're ready, and then you've got to pay the assisted living
Right.
price as well.
So there's a company called Touchmark that's developing, going to be developing, I think they're going to start construction in about a year up in McKinney, this type of community. And I know these folks, they're good people. It's a for-profit company, but they're really good. So that's the only one I know that's coming close by to us. Their rental, and nationally, this is a big growth, the types that you see. Tax credit, senior living, those, that's the McKinney campus up there. I think it's called Country Place or Country States or something, right across from the hospital. Rental with annual income restrictions. I think your income has to be about $32,000 or less to qualify. And they're nice. They really are nice. But they get the tax credit the developer does in return for giving the low rate. It's Country Lane. That's the name of the one in McKinney. Most have large waiting lists. If you don't get in, you have to wait a while to get in. Then assisted living. Okay, so assisted living basically provides housing and care for the activities of daily living that somebody may need help with, including eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, maintaining continence, and limited nursing services, very limited nursing services. Enough, however, that assisted living is keeping a lot of people out of nursing homes. Because there used to be a lot of people in nursing homes that didn't need to be there. And assisted living came about the time, a couple of years after I got into the business in '85, we started to see assisted living coming up around '88, '89, 1990. And then the 1990s it exploded. So it's all designed for people that need some assistance with daily living activities. Then, I just want to show you there's three kinds of assisted living communities. There's a typical, this is the Heritage at Twin Creeks, right next to Walmart on Exchange, and it's got the hallways and then the living in common space. That's the typical kind of assisted living, but there's a new thing coming out called the household model, where they're doing basically smaller households, where in this case I think there's 12 living units around a common area, and everybody can just come right out of their room and go right into the common area. And they're really nice, and it's very popular. So this new household style is picking up. And then there's some, like Mustang Creek Estates down here in Allen, that are residential, where they look like a single family house. But they'll be like this inside. Actually, Mustang Creek Estates, they have 15 rooms surrounding an open common area where you feel like you're living in a house with 15 bedrooms. So that household model is becoming real popular.
Rick, my mom lived at Mustang Creek for about a year and a half, and it was wonderful.
My mom lived there too. Yep, and we liked it a lot. She moved to another one because my sister's daughter-in-law worked at another place. So, but yeah, the Mustang Creek is a good concept.
Pat
Good.
Lanford's mother lived there, and my mom had her room.
Awesome, good. So just know there's a variety of kinds of assisted living layouts. Then memory care really is assisted living. It's just with special programming for memory care. Much higher staffing, much more programming, much more going on to keep the residents as busy and active and non-agitated, and so and there's a lot of skill and training required for memory care people that work in those communities, because as Nancy could tell you, it's a challenge in many cases to deal with them. So it's a higher level of programming, but all of the same eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, maintaining continence, and limited nursing services are available, plus this special memory care program that they have. So the big question you're going to want to ask is, tell me about the programming. What's my mom or my spouse going to be doing every day? What's your program? Then long-term nursing care, usually private pay or Medicaid, or after Medicare pays for it. That's the one across the street off of Central. I can't remember the name of it right offhand. You're probably familiar with it. But it's long-term nursing care. Declining demand due to growth in assisted living and memory care. Many of the old nursing homes in Texas are closing. Many of those that were Medicaid funded, the Medicaid payment to the owners is so bad that they're just saying, I know of one client in San Antonio that said, Rick, we're losing $1 million a year on Medicaid, and we just can't keep doing that. So they just close it. They just close the place. So many older communities are closing. And the occupancy is the lowest in nursing care that it's been in a long time. And that's what we know as nursing homes. Then your rehab, okay, so like when I had my knee replacement, I went to outpatient rehab here at Plano Acute Medical, Allen Acute Medical, post-acute Allen, I guess is what it is. But those are rehab places. Usually Medicare pays the post-acute rehab following joint replacement, strokes, broken hips, etc. It's much more outpatient now. Used to be you need to move in there for a couple of weeks to get rehab. Now they're doing more outpatient. Usually part of a nursing home. Most nursing homes have a rehab section. That's where they make the money. It's a big deal to do the rehab because the Medicare payment is much higher than Medicaid and many times higher than the private pay. And many are now specialty focused. Many are saying, well, we're going to specialize in Parkinson's, or we're going to specialize in cardiology, or heart failure, or whatever. So many are setting specialties because They depend on their business depends on the hospitals referring to them. It's all about the referrals. And they are included in the continuing care retirement communities. Okay, so I think we're going to be in good shape here. What do we need to know to make the right choice? Your factors. So I started doing this, and it works really well in the little seminars that I do, is encourage people when you or a family member or friend is starting to say, well, maybe we need to start thinking about this. I recommend you break your thinking down into 6 aspects of life. Lifestyle. Okay. Is our lifestyle going to be better staying where we are or being in a senior living community? Health. What about our health? Let's just focus on our health. Will we be healthier now and in the future, staying where we are or going to another type of community? Fitness. Are we going to be fit and stay as fit as we can where we are or in a senior living community? Now, those of us in Heritage Ranch, we have that fitness stuff. But people in a single family home that don't have a clubhouse with fitness and stuff, they say, yeah, maybe I do need to do that. Security. So just break it down into the small piece of security. Am I going to be more secure staying in my house or being in a senior living community? Socialization. Will I have a better social life if I want to have it by staying where I am in the house or going to a senior living community? And then financial. From a money point of view, where am I better off? Staying where I am in a house or going to a senior living community? And when you break it down into these 6 aspects of life, plus one more, other could be, for example, spiritual. I want to live in a place where I have access to spiritual things. Maybe I want to go to a faith-based, not-for-profit senior living community where I have more spiritual activities and involvement. So there are other factors that you can throw in, but when you break it down into smaller pieces of your life, it makes the decision easier to make. Because otherwise people say, it's just so overwhelming. It's such a big thing. We just won't think about it until we're forced to make a move. But when you think about it and break it down into little pieces, it makes it a lot easier. Community factors. Okay, so those were what you need to think about for you. Now when you go to the community, what you need to think about is, how long have you guys been doing this? How long have you been in senior living? Tell me about your company. Tell me about how long, what's your track record? Management. How long has the manager been here? I want to meet them. I want to talk to them. I want to learn their philosophy. Ownership. Who owns it? What's the motive of the owner? Another thing about the business model of many for-profits is the developer builds it for the intention of filling it up and selling it and taking his profit. And guess what happens to management when it's sold? It's typically going to be a new management company. Not all for-profits have that business philosophy. Many of them do own and manage on a long-term basis. But many of the developers, they just want to get it built, have a management company come in, fill it up, sell it, turn a big profit, and the new owner might say, I don't like that management company. I'm bringing in a new management company. So you're very susceptible to changes in ownership and management because that's just the business model. Their plan is to develop, fill it, sell it, get the money, go build another one, fill it, sell it, go build another one. So you need to know that's a big factor. Then you need to think, okay, do they have the services that I need? Do they have all the services that would make it worth for me to move there? What about amenities? Do they have the amenities? Do they have the fitness center? Do they have a card room? Do they have a pool table? Do they have a swimming pool? Do they have whatever amenities I'm looking for? And then accommodations. Where am I going to live? What are the apartments like? is the living space that I'm going to occupy as a resident something that fits our needs? And I can tell you, they're all going to be smaller than where we live now. But, you know, you just need to know you're going to need to adjust significantly to a smaller style of life. But do the accommodations, will they work for us? And then the lifestyle. What is the lifestyle of the other people that live here? What do they do? And what am I going to do? What's my life going to be like living here? So one way to test this is many communities, and if they don't do this, you need to tell them they need to. Have a trial visit. Try it before you buy it. Where they say, well, why don't you come on and move in here for 3 days? Pack your suitcase and come in, and we've got an apartment. It's our try it before you buy it, or test drive apartment, and live here for 3 days, meet the people, eat the meals, do the activities, come in Tuesday, check out Thursday, see who's here, and then you'll know if this is the right place for you. So I will tell you, you should ask. We would like to try it before we buy it. Just for 3 or 4 days, we'd like to come visit and see what it's like living here. Before, I had a guy in Florida tell me, after one of the seminars I do, the wife said, I'm ready to go and I don't know what's wrong with my husband, he just won't move. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, here's the deal. I sell my house, I get rid of all my stuff, I move in there and I don't like it. Where do I go? I've sold my house, I've got rid of my stuff, I have no idea. Well, why don't you go try it for 3 days? I can do that. Well, if it's a good community, they're going to have a trial program. He said, that's what I want. I need to know what it's like. I've never lived in one of these places. So the try it before you buy it will help you understand the lifestyle. And then what are the financial options? You need to think, is the money fitting with, you know, does it look like they have good options at the community financially? Do we need rental, or if it's an entrance deposit, are we comfortable that we're going to get our money back? So those are the things that you need to think about to make the right choice. So we've got 5 minutes left. And Frito, do you want to open it up for questions or do the hymn or whatever?
Let's turn the lights on first. So I don't fall walking up there. You know what, I think we should open it up for questions. Should I take the microphone to the people?
Okay. Do we have 2 minutes?
Yeah, there's one over there.
Thank you, Rick.
I'm glad he lives down the street from me.
Rick, thank you. I have a question about the faith-based. You didn't touch much on them. Is there a long waiting list to get into those? If not, what are the disadvantages?
I would say that there's probably not, well, just think of the ones locally here. Christian Care Centers in Allen off of Greenville is the closest faith-based, and it's just down Greenville behind the Church of Christ Church. And they definitely have a wait list for their little cottages, I know that. And they probably have availability in assisted living and memory care. Most of them will have availability in assisted living and memory care. Some will have a wait list for the independent living. Across the country, there's quite a few of the faith-based that do have a wait list.
Rick, C.C. Young, which is a Methodist home in northeast Dallas and Lake Highlands, has just built new facilities, and they've got room. It's quite nice.
Yeah, I'm extremely familiar with C.C. Young, and it is very nice.
Why would you not go there?
Why would you not? Only if you don't want to pay the entrance deposit, because most of the faith-based, now Christian Care here doesn't, it's rental. But C.C. Young, the older apartments at C.C. Young are rental, the newer ones are entrance fee. If you don't want to pay the entrance deposit, then, you know, you're not going to want to go there.
Presbyterian Village is another one.
Yeah, Presbyterian Village North. Yeah, there's several. In fact, Presbyterian Village North has a new expansion that opened about 2 years ago, and it's really nice. And they have a waiting list on the new expansion.
Rick, thank you for your presentation. You really opened my eyes to the number of questions that you really have to ask in order to go to the place you need to be. But let me ask you, are there fee-for-service companies or organizations who help walk you through all these decisions, because it is really complicated? Do you do this sort of thing?
I don't do that kind of thing, and there's, let me give you a little warning here. It's a good question. Are there companies that will walk you through this? How many of you have seen the A Place for Mom commercials? A Place for Mom. And then there's some individual people that do this, will help you find the right place. Here's the deal. If a community does not have a contract with A Place for Mom, you're never going to hear about it. Because, and they tell you it's free, but the community pays a huge referral fee for everyone that moves in. And if they're not, if the community's not their client, you're never going to hear about it. So there are, look for elder care, let's see, there are elder care advisors. And if you find an individual, that's going to be the best deal.
I know one.
You do know one? Okay, good.
And we've talked about, let me just key on that. We've talked about doing this on a quarterly basis. The next speaker I've got lined up for this fall is a broker, and he will tell you what it is he offers, and he does get paid by the nursing home, not you, but he's just like your real estate guy. Now, you got to ask him some questions, and I would have questions for him if I was wanting him to represent me. But I've seen his presentation, and he got into the business he's in because he got in a crisis situation with his mother. One of these things was Paul Markowitz. Yeah, you know him. Yeah. So if this is something you're interested in, I will put out something about when he's coming in the fall.
That's good.
Paul Markowitz is the kind of individual that you want to talk to.
Rick, this is a great presentation, by the way. Thank you. Is there any way we can get a copy of this presentation emailed to each of us, so if somebody has a reminder?
I can do that, and if you'd like, we're recording it, because I was asked to record it, so we'll have I'll probably put it on YouTube, and you guys can direct it to people. If it works, if Roxanne hadn't messed it all up.
Rick, the red light stopped blinking.
Rick's going to need a place to stay tonight if anybody has a spare room.
Rick, you've talked a lot about entrance fees, but you haven't talked about what the monthly fees are, kind of what the range is for a one-person, two-person.
Good.
And I know it varies, but it's a one bedroom or two-bedroom apartment too. So
good to ask that, and I was thinking about that the other day, and I should have put it in. Okay, so we know what Heritage Ranch is. You buy it at your house. The active adult 55 plus overture, I think, is around $1,700 a month up to probably $3,500 a month.
They start at $1,200.
$1,200, okay.
And go up beyond $2,800.
28, okay,
Or
good.
24 square feet.
Okay,
is a larger-
yeah. I didn't realize it started as low as 1,200. That's good.
Well, it's a really small one then.
Yeah, probably almost the studio. So the full service communities where they have the meals, the transportation activities and all that, with apartment style living are going to be $2,000 to $4,000 a month. The continuing care retirement communities are going to have the interest deposit of $300,000 up, and monthly fees about the same as the full service, $2,000 up to $6,000 a month. There's usually a second person fee if two of you go in, which will be anywhere from $800 to $1,500 a month for the second person fee, because it's another person having meals and activities and program and transportation and all that. Assisted living, if you can find one for $3,500, you're lucky. Probably average around $4,000 to $4,500. Memory care, if you can find one for $6,000, you're probably lucky, because it can go up
to 10.
Yes, it can go up to 10. Mm-hmm. And nursing care is $250 a day, roughly, private pay.
We had long-term
Do most of these places accept that if you have to go into assisted living or?
Yes, she has. How many of you have long-term care insurance? Lucky you, because I can't get it with this hard stuff. And yes, if it's a licensed assisted living, memory care, nursing home, nursing care, they will take your long-term care insurance. Independent living does not.
Yeah, and they pay after 90 days.
Up to 90 days.
So the first 90 days you pay, they give you that.
Right. Yeah, there's an elimination period.
I have a question. You know, I've been cautioned about getting some of that insurance. How do you know you're getting an insurance policy that is going to take care of you as you want to be taken care of? Does that make sense?
Well, the insurance, I'm not an insurance expert, but basically if you're in a licensed assisted living or memory care or nursing care, they just pay you whatever your monthly benefit is, $200 a day, $250 a day for a certain number of years. And you pick the community you want to go to, and it's either going to provide the services you need or not. The insurance company is just going to provide a daily benefit to you.
Right, they're not gonna take your insurance as their total payment, probably. You're gonna have whatever your insurance pays you for being there on a daily basis, and then you gotta come up with the rest of it.
Yeah. Guarantee you that.
Any other questions?
If you have to leave, we're a little over time. If you have to leave, I don't want to cut off the questions as long as we got them, but if you have to leave, we won't frown at you. Okay?
We just really appreciate all of you who attended today. I think it was very well.
Do we have any more questions? Anybody else have a question?
A lot to think about.
It is overwhelming. He tries to break it down because it's this big and you can't.
I'm real familiar with this because I've gone through this with not only my husband, but with my mother in Florida. So what I do find is people always wait too long before they start the process.
That's a
and
fact.
I've heard that over and over and over again from these facilities. So just for fun, start going out and looking at them. And I always tell everybody, go see them and start eliminating where you don't want to live. And then you can narrow it down so that when you get into that position where you have to make a move, you know, okay, well, these were the three we really like, so let's get serious. But start eliminating places that you don't want to live into, that are, you know, close by your kids or whatever, you know, convenience factor you're looking for.
And let me add what Paul Markowitz would tell you: never, ever, ever give them your phone number. If you're visiting, give them your email, but don't give your phone number. The other thing is never, ever, ever indicate what your financial resources are. Because if you get a guy like him, he negotiates the price. He can save some families, husbands and wives, as much as $12,000 a year off the price that they'll charge. So those are two things. If you go out and look, and that's an excellent idea to eliminate. Don't give them your phone number, only the email address, because they will run you into the ground. And number two, don't give them any indication of what you can afford, what you can pay, or what your financial resources are. You take all his leverage away, or somebody that represents you like that.
I have a concern over quality of care. That's the big thing, of course, all of us have. One of the things about this type of arrangement in terms of the continuum of care you get from independent living all the way down to a nursing home. And I find in my experiences, because I've been involved in senior care, is that as you go down the continuum for staffing, the worse it gets. You know, the assisted living people and people that work in assisted living are pretty good, but you don't have very much care being, you know, given to you, of course. So as the care increases with staff, the harder it is to find a good place. okay? Now, my question is, I know for nursing homes that you have, you're under state regulations. Each state has their own regulations and all, and they have, you're evaluated and you're rated. Does that happen also for assisted living as well as memory care?
So the question is, Medicare rates the nursing homes, and it's a 5-star rating, and they look at staffing levels, quality output, turnover, and all kinds of stuff. Assisted living and memory care currently is not regulated like that, but likely will be in the future. The industry doesn't want more government regulation, but it's probably coming. He's right. You know, again, finding people that want to do that kind of work, and the higher the amount of touching and helping people do things that is harder than working at McDonald's, they just don't want to do it. Yeah, you're right. It's hard.
The last place my mom was in was Garnet Hill off of Parker and McCreary. And the staff there was required to have like 2 years, I guess, from like a junior college. And I was very, very pleased with that. As a matter of fact, I went at all different times of the day, and I went almost every day until someone said, you gotta not go as often because what are you gonna do when your mom's gone? And so one day I came and the door was kind of cracked open, and I heard someone talking to my mom, and she was just being so sweet. I'm just gonna listen to this conversation, because I like I said, I popped in and all go at different times. And this is over 17 years, because my mom went from 10 years of independent living to assisted living to memory care. And I was just, there was one place that was a nightmare, and it was up in McKinney off of El Dorado. I got her out of there as fast as I could. But I knew that because I went at different times. And I was like, okay, gotta make a change. But you're right on target with everything that you've said. Like I said, I've lived that, so, with my mom. So thank you.
You bet. So one question relative to the care issue is, you probably should ask them, tell me in detail about the training that these staff members that are going to be caring for my mom receive. And if you hear, well, then say thank you. That's all I need to know. Because the ones that really have the good training, they promote it. And it's critical. And these people have to be trained on what to do and how to do it.
One thing I noticed here that I didn't notice, of course, in Paris, Texas, where my mother was for 10 years before we moved her over here, in talking about the staffing, is to ask the people, do most of your caregivers speak English? When we get to that point where we're in assisted living or skilled nursing, our hearing is somewhat impaired often. And so when you have caregivers who English is not their first language, it makes it very difficult. And I can remember on many occasions my mother, after a caregiver would leave the room, she'd look at me and she'd say, I didn't understand a thing they said. So that's a question to ask too.
Yeah, again, it's any CEO of a retirement community going to tell you that staffing is the biggest issue they have.
Well, as a retired nurse myself, I spent many years taking care of my grandmother, who was my primary caregiver for many years. So I understood this was my best friend in the world, much like your mother's would be, or your father, or your spouse. But one of the most important things is a person to be your advocate. So many of you have been caregivers and have been the advocates for your parents or for whomever. If you are a single person with a spouse no longer living, or just that you are single, you need to cultivate the friendship of one of your children. Not all of your children are worthy caregivers. Some of them travel with their jobs. And that makes them, it's not that they're not loving, but they just have circumstances where they can't perform as a caregiver. They can't be available. They can't be there. I know my son spent many an hour with my grandmother after a fall in an emergency room. He said, Mom, it was so overwhelming to have to help Nana to the potty, you know, and she didn't know who I was, Mom. After, you know, half raising me, she didn't know who I was. So it's real important to think of your caregivers down the road, whether it's moving close to a child that can provide that service. You don't want to be in Timbuktu when someone needs you. You don't want to be 5 hours away. So it's just an important thought to remember.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing to that. Don't overreact if there's an isolated incident. Because my sister, when my mom was in a place, would overreact every little thing. It was, you know, and these people are humans, and they will make some mistakes. So if overall, you know, the care is good, just know that occasionally somebody will slip, something will happen, and it would be an isolated case. If it's not an isolated case, then you gotta take action.